Okay, the third topic for today is type 1 and type 2 errors. We never prove anything with statistics. We're always dependent on our sample, and just by sheer bad luck, we're sometimes going to get bad samples. So our confidence interval might not contain the true population mean or percent. And our hypothesis test, well, we're making a decision, right, about the null hypothesis. We may make the wrong decision. So we're making decisions all the time, right? And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Maybe you're thinking about whether to bring an umbrella with you for the day. Well, if you bring the umbrella and it rains, that worked out perfectly, right? That was the right decision. But if you bring an umbrella and it doesn't rain, then at the end of the day, you're thinking, oh brother, I carry this umbrella all day long. Whereas if you leave the umbrella home and it rains, well, then you're wet. You've made the wrong decision. But if you leave the umbrella at home and it doesn't rain, well, then again, you've made the right decision. So same thing with hypothesis testing. We can reject the null hypothesis, that's one possible decision, or we can fail to reject the null. We can accept the null as true. Okay, those are the possible decisions. And the possible states in the world are that the null is true or the null is false. Well, if we reject the null when the null hypothesis is false, we have made the right decision. If we fail to reject the null, if we accept the null when the null is true, again, we've made the right decision. But if we reject the null when we should not have, because the null is actually true, we've made a mistake. We've made an error. And that is called a type 1 error. If we fail to reject the null when we should have, because it actually is false, that's a type 2 error. So type 1, rejecting the null when we should not have. Type 2, failing to reject the null when we should have. And we can make both kinds of errors. Alpha is actually the rate of type 1 errors. So when you set your level of significance, when you choose your alpha, your cutoff for deciding if something is statistically significant or not, you are actually setting your type 1 error rate. And people almost always choose 0.05, but sometimes obviously lower or higher. So when you reject the null when the null is true, you have made a type 1 error. When you fail to reject the null when it's actually false, you've made a type 2 error. And this happens because every so often we end up with a very unusual sample. We don't know we've made that kind of error because we don't know that our sample is so unusual, but we just have to acknowledge that there's a chance that we're wrong, that we've made this decision based on our sample, but if our sample is bad, we will acknowledge we've made the wrong decision.